Well, here we are again. Thank you for joining me again. Prisoners of the Mind series. Of course, it's much more than the mind. But today, this particular video is going to be dedicated to what used to be called multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder today, as it's called. But that's not why I'm doing it. I want to introduce you to another aspect of our study down the line because we tackle virtually everything that has been written off by Christians or that the world has distorted and perverted. And this is definitely one of those situations. So I want to talk about multiple personality disorder. I'm going to call it like it was known because dissociative gets really classy, but hides a lot of the profound elements we want to talk about. The mental health people have got this thing in a little box for them, and it's called an extreme disorder on a continuum from mild to completely dysfunctional. And they say that if you have more than one personality that's taking the front, the surface, that you are dysfunctional. Now, they go to great lengths in their symptomatic book called the DSM-4, which I have actually they got another one on the market now. I have the older version, but as you can see right here, um, this was given to me by a couple when I was in my theological studies for my PhD. Uh, you will find that they like to capture an audience for themselves. And so if they can take every so-called abnormality that is either invented or pretend to be in existence, they can charge the enormous fees they charge, medicate you with medication, keep you coming for psychoanalysis, make a fortune off of you, and in the end result is you can drool out the corner of your mouth with psychotropic medication. You can sit with all the humanistic counseling that they give you, and they no more understand what the real connection is, most of them, and especially the intricate connections of the body, soul, and spirit. So I want to discuss this from a personal perspective since I was identified as having multiple personalities and in fact did um, with my high level of dysfunction when I was going through therapy, having been traumatized as a baby, a child, all the way up through my adult life without knowing it. I want to talk about this, but I can only scratch the surface on this particular one, and we can bring it on board for a roundtable discussion when the technology is plugged in, or you can just send a question in email. But the mental health view, I'm just going to say right out flat, is completely unacceptable to me from a Christian standpoint and from a creative standpoint in the Garden of Eden in Genesis. I cannot imagine the kind of mind that God created in Adam, and we feel like it had one personality. We built this because multiple personalities are many facets of the mind cognitively focusing on the world was accepted way back in Greek days, Aristotle and Plato and others, all the way up till recently when the psychiatric profession decided to build themselves their own little game instead of being part of the general mental health population practitioners. And they did exactly that. And that's an interesting study sometime you should dig into for yourself if you want to research how manufactured madness can occur, because that's what they have done. But nevertheless, let's talk about this because there may be many of you out there suffering with it who don't know or who have suffered with it or who have been 30, 40 years trying to get healed from it and still have problems with it. Let's talk about the general things and then we can go into specifics at a later date. The creative view is that God created the human to do multifaceted processing. And if it's working in the unity that the Holy Spirit depended on, designed it to work in, you'll never notice a personality as we would call dysfunctional. Let me give you some general pictures. Is the father who runs a multi-billion dollar corporation. And he's got a board of 36 members sitting around in a very strategic financial deal. Now, this man has a 2-year-old that previous to that day's meeting, the night before, he was crawling all around the floor, laughing, cooing, playing toys with. But now here he is running this corporation, having to be very aggressive, very organized, very effective. Now, which of those men is dysfunctional? You say, well, none of them. That's correct. But what the mental health profession has tried to do is to make you think that when we can distinguish a second personality that takes its own affect characteristics and so forth, that it's now dysfunctional, which entitles them for 5, 6, 10 years of personal counseling with them, psychotherapy, in addition to maybe selling a book. We have many, many personas. We were marvelously created, as David says. So we function on a multiplicity level. Yes, personalities, if you want to call them that. We process cognitively in different levels at different degrees, and there's different personas that take that over. I can do things at other times I can't do right now. And I'm sure we can get into cognitive processing discussions. However, what I want to talk about today is I would like to discuss some of the things that are pertinent to this opening survey. Did you know that having worked with over 4 decades of people with personas, most of my work is with multiple personalities and demonic powers, evil spirits, as well as the mind and all the subcategories and the subconscious programming? Did you know that those inside personas that can actually talk to you, they can speak out of the mouth of the person just like a baby can speak out of his mouth. They actually have cognitive ability. They can think, they can laugh, they can cry, they can hurt, they can remember. They can, at some stages, engage the body to move for them and do things. I once knew with a person who had been abducted by a cult at a very early age. When we began to actually do the healing, we brought up a 7-year-old who began to get some amazing healing through the work that we were doing by the empowering of God. Actually, something happened, and on the way home, another persona came up, and they were driving down the road, and I called ahead because I was following them, concerned about their safety, and I had a 5-year-old persona talking to me. It was a 5-year-old child virtually in that person's body driving the car, and the car was going up and down the road doing this. And that was a very interesting night for us all. We got them there safely, but you would have said, had I not told you anything, that where did that 5-year-old child get in that car? When? When did a child get in that car? How did it learn to drive? How did it learn to talk? There are many things that are absolutely amazing about the world of the soul. The mind, will, the intellect, the will, and the emotions. What happens to this harmonious? Let's just take an example that the mind is like a well-oiled orchestra, one of the most amazing orchestras, and everyone has their talent, their gift. They work harmoniously, and you can't tell whether the flute player is really playing off key or not. As long as he's playing in unison according to his training, you hear a absolutely one unified, harmonious, beautiful sound. And you see and hear and distinguish no disunification. Now let's take that orchestra and let's take the violinist and have him go into the bathroom while they're playing, and he starts playing in the bathroom. Suddenly you hear off key, off chord, out in the area, away from the unity, a violinist playing. Now that violinist is by no means no longer a violinist, but he is no longer harmoniously working as a group, as a team in the group. We don't know why he decided to go to the bathroom at that time, but the fact is he did. Well, that is how, in a very basic picture, the disruption of the human mind works. God made us with many facets. I have talked to people with hundreds of personalities that had major trauma. Now, one of the significant keys that will disrupt this unified process is trauma, major trauma. And trauma is up to the eye of the beholder, perceived. What would be trauma to me wouldn't be to you. But if that trauma is significant enough, the unification processing, cognitive processing of the mind will begin to splinter, and the mind, in a self defensive pattern, will begin to place some personas in their own little apartment house or cubicle in the mind. That separation will enable you, if it functions on a higher level, to notice it. If it's sealed off, you may not notice it so much. But when 5 or 10 of them do that, now we have a big disruptive problem. This is what they would call dissociative identity disorder. But to make a statement that multiple personalities are abnormal is completely ridiculous. And if you want to talk about a beautiful family, when they begin to heal, I talk to more children and more adults inside of people, and the beauty that they have, the love they have for Christ Jesus, and the contribution they make to the whole of the unification of the body as it physically, emotionally, and spiritually operates is astounding to the human mind. In fact, I've often said to people I'd rather talk to personalities than humans. Why? Because they're more real, they're more realistic once they get past their denial, and they're absolutely a joy. I've talked to 2-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 20-year-olds, and each one had its own separate story. So multiplicity of the mind is a natural thing. And we're going to be spending quite a time on that down the road, because it is not rare, as the mental health practitioners would have us believe. In fact, it is very, very prevalent. And if you go over into second and third world countries where they don't have the civilized scientific culture, they're all over the place there, because they're being raped, killed, sodomized, destroyed by wars and wars and battles and wars. And the mind just builds all of these personalities. But in America, everything has to be scientifically perfect. So everything is smoothed out to hide and mask the trauma until a person gets to such a stage that they no longer can contain functioning without one or two of those personas who have been deeply hurt coming to the surface and making their presence known. It's rare that when I work with people that I can't go inside by permission and find the personalities that are hurting. A link to major healing of major diseases, emotional, psychospiritual, and physical. One of the keys is multiplicity of the mind. Yes, I definitely believe in multiple personalities, and I believe you probably have them. I know you do. Now, whether they're functional and how functional they are is another matter. But you see, let me bring this down to where you are, because haven't you ever been doing something and you heard a thought and you thought that was a rare thought because you didn't believe that? So what the Christian world does is we immediately label that as a demon, but it's not. It could just be a smaller child that was traumatized. When you were 6, you might have got traumatized by being left alone in the store, and it was so horrific to you as a 6-year-old that the mind took that little 6-year-old mindset and put it in a cubicle, closed it away, and now for some reason it's resurfacing as the memories leak, and you can hear it talking to you. And let's say that you now, as a 35-year-old mother, are in the store and suddenly your husband has left you, and in just a very quick moment, you suddenly feel overwhelmed with fear and loneliness and complete panic. But you don't know why, because you're an adult. That is the 6-year-old triggered by the You being left alone, it was connected for a moment in time and space of the inside psychic, and therefore it is surfacing close enough to the conscious mind for you to be, in all practical manners, consideration, 6-year old for a few moments. That explains a lot of the behaviors that we go through as adults. But because what the mental health has done, we are scared to come forward and get the help we need. Multiplicity of the mind, when it becomes dysfunctional, I believe is responsible for 75+% of for broken relationships. I believe it's high on the above 75% of addictions. And almost any major personality disorder that you find listed by psychologists, I can find a primary source, a basement problem with multiplicity. And it's not the kind of thing you can just go in and start talking and pretend that you know, because it can be very damaging. Because what happens to make the issue of dysfunctional multiplicity a problem is that the adversary, the spirit world, will attach the spirit beings to these disruptive, traumatized personalities or personas, mind parts, and then they will become much worse as time goes on, because the demonic power, the spirit being, will cause it to re-channel its energy to serve evil. I just find this subject fascinating. And I can't begin to tell you how real it is to providing recovery for you, whether you be an alcoholic, a drug addict, a bipolar, which is another great masking name for what I have found to be multiple personalities. I remember a situation one time where a lady was brought to us because she had become so obsessive in her physical running every morning and night that her family was being cut out completely. Come rain or shine, snow or sleet, she had to run precisely at the same time, 3 to 5 miles. She was having all kinds of eating disorders, and she went to some of the best doctors for 3 or 4 years, and she could not get help. When she ended up working with our team, one of the first things I asked her was there any point in her life when she suffered any kind of trauma according to her perception? And she said yes, there was. There was a person in their life that was very important to them in the family member, and someone came in from the outside and took their affection away from them, and virtually told this woman that was seeking help that she was just fat and ugly, and that their family member didn't want anything to do with them anymore. They wanted her because she was beautiful. And that little, maybe humorous to you, situation catapulted her into such trauma that she'd be losing that family member, that a persona, a mind part, began to form that basically said, I'll show you. Now, as I'm sitting in front of this adult mother of 3, married, Christian woman, I said to her, would it be okay if I speak inside to the one who likes to run? I know you don't believe us, understand it, but would you give me permission? She said, well, of course. So I went inside, and I'll just make it very quick for you to see how distinct these personas are. I said, how long are you going to keep her running? Is it going to take her collapsing on the road, bleeding from exhaustion? And her face changed. She got very rigid. She looked me in the eye. Very obviously, a whole different persona came up and said to me, Dr. Stanfield, if you think you're going to cause her to quit running, you have a second thought coming. I will not permit her to stop. And welcome stage right, I found the persona. Now, in that persona, as time evolved, we found the belief systems, the fear of losing that person, everything that created that persona and caused it to become dysfunctional. Whereas before, it was in complete unity and harmonious function. Now, I'd like to talk further about this, but there's so much to be said. I just want to whet your appetite about multiplicity. I can't tell you how many people are sitting in church, firemen, doctors, lawyers, that have these persona problems. And I would love to have time to expand on how they function with addiction, how they function with prostitution, how they function with homosexuality, but I cannot. I just do not have the time at this particular video, in this particular video, to discuss it. But I would love to entertain your questions. I know I'm speaking to a very broad population out there because I've worked with a lot of trauma victims of early childhood abuse who have multiplicity. They may or may not know it. We have tools that we can teach you to dialogue inside, self-dialogue under our coaching. Get in touch with them. We can give you guidelines. You can be amazed. What the most beautiful thing is I see Christians today that have the most beautiful family unit inside when God comes in and heals that multiplicity to go back to its creative state of functioning harmoniously. No psychotropic drugs, no long psychoanalysis, no humanistic philosophy, just the Holy Spirit using the power and understanding of our 4 decades of research and harmoniously putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. And many times those personas, those mind parts, are harmoniously blended according to God's time plan. Each one having its own function, gift, and personality. So, what am I saying? I'm saying that multiplicity is not abnormal. But when we begin to function in ways that are disruptive to our life, that's abnormal. Then we need to, whether it be anger, rage, we need to get hold of the inner family with you and connect you, and by the power of God, begin to work with those personas to get healing, and the time of healing can be amazingly fast. Well, I hope I haven't disappointed you. This is Dr. Stanfield with another interesting topic that we'll be working on in Prisoners of the Mind. As I said earlier, it's a long series. But I think that each aspect that we work on, I'm trusting, are going to reach you. Whether it be depression, a persona can be depressed. I worked with a woman who came to me because she had felt time was coming she'd commit suicide. And she was in her 40s, and I found an 18-year-old personality that had been heartbroken at 18. Her heart broken by someone that she loved. And that beautiful persona is a gorgeous, gorgeous part of this woman's life today. I call that family. They're my family. It is not unusual at all for me to call someone who we know I've worked with the personas and have one speak to me before I get to the host or the adult who carries the body. And I have a conversation with them. Oh, it's so nice you called, Dr. Stanfield. I am doing so wonderful since we worked together. Guess what I'm doing for Jesus? Before you take a strict, narrow view because you're fearful of this, because it's so out of the box maybe for you, or because you're a practitioner who just believes this is holy, if we can't connect the body, soul, and spirit back together in a unification and creative process that God meant it, then we're not doing our job out here. And it's no wonder we have so many people sitting at church day in, day out, Sunday in, Sunday out, and they go away still struggling with all of these symptoms of emotional and psychological disorder. Remember, we'd like for you to sign up for a newsletter. In that way, you will be put into the circle of monthly newsletters that will tell you what we're doing, what seminars we're having, what will be available for you in your home. If you'd like to link in and connect to one of our training sessions, our seminars, or if you want some therapy at home, whatever it is, the newsletter is the key because we need a contact name and email so that we can keep you abreast of the cutting-edge revelations that God is revealing for these last days as He puts His church back in connection with Him. So, let me encourage you to please think about this, pray about it, and send your questions to me. My personal email is listed on our website, www.globaltraumaservices.com. There are articles on there, there are videos on there. We'll continue to work on it and expand on it. And pretty soon we'll have global meetings where we can sit together in support groups and global meetings and train and grow and learn. And perhaps the leadership of the church will join us and begin to minister to the forgotten hurting people who don't just get whole by saying we'll pray for you. Well, as usual, it's been wonderful speaking with you, and I look forward to hearing from you real soon.